Good morning. It's a great honor to be speaking here on this final day of this iHonors Summit, which is all about how data and information can help us live in a better world, can help us live in a sustainable world, and can help us take more intelligent actions. So before I start on my presentation about knowledge coming from nature and biodiversity, I want to just run a little test by you. I'm going to show you a bunch of numbers. Our world is full of numbers, and I apologize already. You'll get quite a few in my presentation. So let's have a look at this one. Have a look at this number. Does anyone know what this stands for? Ah, very good, very good. Some of you remember your school mathematics. Indeed, it is the number pi in mathematics. And yes, there it is. Unfortunately, we can't eat that, but it looks very good. Okay, here is another one. Have a look at this number, please. The next one. There, it's a little bit slower than we are. Now, can anyone shed light on this number? Oh, this is a great audience. Indeed, it is the speed of light. Okay, here is another number. The next one, 7 billion. The population since when? October 31st, just a little bit over a month ago. That's how many of us there are on this planet, it is said. We already are more since I've started this speech. Okay, now one more, the last one. 8.7 million. Does anybody know what that stands for? We've got the President of Conservation International in the front row. Indeed, this number represents the latest scientific estimate of the number of species living on planet Earth, which for the sake of argument, I'll follow in this presentation. So remember that number, although frankly, the estimates range between 5 to 100 million. But let's use this number, 8.7 million. You probably also know that only a small proportion of the total number of species known to us is known to science. So we think there are 8.7 million. Now, 1.9 million plants and animals have been described so far, some 250 years since the Swedish biologist Carl Linnaeus first devised a method of cataloging and naming living things. Very recently, the Catalogue of Life, the official central database of species names, contained 72% of the number of described species. I'm sorry I'm giving you so many numbers. So, in other words, remember the 8.7 million species that are thought to exist on our planet today. Barely 15% have been logged in central databases today. So, at the current pace, it would take thousands of specialists and more than 1,000 years to go through the laborious process of describing the new discoveries in scientific journals, getting this work peer-reviewed, and then putting them in the Catalogue of Life. It's a huge effort. Now, around 60,000, or some 3% of all known species, have been assessed by the IUCN Red List of threatened species, which is considered to be the world's most authoritative and comprehensive source of information concerning the status of animals and plants on our planet. Remember the word status, it's very, very important. How are we doing on this planet? I always describe the Red List as the health check on our planet. So, 60,000, it's only 3% of what we think exists out there. But nonetheless, the Red List does cover all known mammals, birds, amphibians, sharks and rays, reef-building corals, cycads and conifers. Reptiles and fish and several other groups are well on the way to being assessed. The biggest gaps, and remember this conference started out with minding the gap. We need to understand the biggest gaps are among plants and insects. And there are supposedly about 1 million insects among the Earth's species that are known to science. We need to find out more about them. But even with minding these gaps, even with these gaps, we know we have a problem, and we need to listen to what we hear. The latest update of this IUCN Red List paints a bleak picture. 1/4 of all mammals, our closest relatives, are threatened with extinction. 41% of amphibians, 13% of birds, and 41% of cycads and conifers are also in danger. So talking of our closest relatives, just imagine if this news were about your closest family or your friends. I hope you would be seriously worried. Well, the threats to these species do also pose a serious threat to us, and we've got to improve our knowledge about the amazing diversity of life that exists on our planet and that can help us lead happier and healthier lives. So just imagine now a new drug that can keep you more active and fit, a new drug that can reduce the risk of cancer, of diabetes, of heart disease, a drug that would improve mental well-being and learning. For example, a drug that would have made me memorize these numbers in 3 minutes that I had free this morning. I would have loved that, and I wouldn't have had to use these cards not to put you on the wrong track. So, and what about this drug if it would also deliver clean water and fresh air? This new drug would certainly win a Nobel Prize, but it's not a drug at all. It's simply nature. It's a forest, it's a park, it's a beach. Can you imagine our world without ever taking a walk in a forest, for example? Just imagine that. Now, what if we visualized our planet as a living being? Forests are, of course, its lungs. Rivers and water streams are arteries carrying blood and nutrients. Wetlands are kidneys that serve as natural filters to remove waste. And of course, as Sylvia Earle reminded us yesterday, the oceans are the blue heart of the planet. That's 72% of the planet that is blue, that is the blue heart. The point is, if we are to improve the state of our planet, then just like in the medical world, we need to have the best diagnostics, the best treatments, and we need to have researchers and doctors who are talking to each other and learning from each other. So this is where environmental data comes in, and that's why this summit is so important. We must invest in better and greater knowledge, make it more applied and more accessible, and make better use of what we already have. It's too easy to say, we don't know, let's wait to find out more. We don't have so much time. So for example, only $60 million could transform the IUCN Red List into a true barometer of life and triple the number of species currently assessed within 5 years. Most importantly, the sample of species that we could find out with this small investment could be representative of biodiversity as a whole. I think such a barometer would be one of the best investments we can make for the good of humanity. Now, you all know people who depend on data for their everyday work. I'm sure you do as well. So for example, if you are a pilot and you don't read your dashboard, you're surely in for a crash landing. If you're an entrepreneur and you don't listen to the signals of the market, you're in for bankruptcy. If you're a politician, and we've seen these pictures all this year, and you don't listen to the voice of your people, you're going to be out of power pretty soon. But for some reason, when it comes to our planet, we just don't seem to get the message. We're not paying attention to the symptoms we already feel today. The dead zones off our coast, the forests where we haven't heard a bird sing for a long time, or deserts that have turned into dust bowls. I was amazed at the number of younger people here at this conference who I've talked to, who've told me that even in their short lifetime, they have seen the difference in their environment, not only in this country, but in all over the world. So why aren't we listening to these signals? Could it be the case that the more we know, the less we care? Or is it that we don't yet know how to make data and information relevant to others beyond the environmental community? Today, we have overwhelming scientific and increasingly economic evidence that our very survival on this planet is not possible without the life support that we get from nature. Just think about it: food, water, medicine, shelter, clean air, the clothes I'm wearing. So let me remind you again, at least 14% of birds, 22% of the world's mammals, and 4% of amphibians that appear on the IUCN Red List of threatened species are used for food, medicine, and other purposes. Many people go to supermarkets and see this food and they have no idea where it comes from. And there are about 90,000 unknown plants, some of which could transform food production, provide the food security that our headlines are talking about all the time, medical research, and so on, if they don't become extinct before we discover them. In the latest update of the IUCN Red List of threatened species, the tree known as Taxus contorta, or Himalayan yew, moved sharply from the vulnerable to the endangered category. It has lost at least half of its range in India, in Pakistan, in Nepal, in Tibet, in Afghanistan. Now, what is the reason for this? The bark of the tree is used to produce Taxol, a chemotherapy drug, and that is a proven chemotherapy drug. However, the harvesting of the bark kills the tree, which is why we're losing this very important species. Now, it doesn't have to be this way. We could do the harvesting by simply clipping parts of the tree and not killing the tree. It's quite simple. We need to just listen to what science tells us. Now, the next story is very much sadder indeed. The western black rhino has now been officially declared extinct. And this is really a sad story. And two other rhino species, the northern white rhino and the Javan rhino, are teetering on the brink of extinction. I actually saw the last 4 northern white rhinos, and it doesn't look like they're going to have young ones. So what is the main reason for this? You probably already know. We've talked about it here before. It's obviously poaching and illegal trade driven by the false belief that the rhino horn can cure cancer. This is not the same story as the Taxol story. So the UN Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, CITES, and you've heard this, this particular statistic earlier in this conference, has officially declared that rhino horn is now worth more than the price of gold on the black market. This is really sad. So this is where the money question comes in. And we're not talking about dirty money from illegal wildlife trade. We're talking about valuing the gifts of nature, which we have simply taken for granted for an awfully long time. Thanks to the landmark study, The Economics of Ecosystems and Biodiversity, called TEEB, in the conservation community, we love acronyms and we've got to stop using them. But this was an important study. So thanks to this study, we know how much we benefit from the Earth's living riches and how much we risk to lose, how much it would cost. So what we have done in this economic study for the first time is started to put values in terms of dollars and dollars or euros on the value of nature. Let me give you some numbers. For example, more than 1/4 of modern medicines comes from tropical forest plants. And this is thought to value something like $108 billion a year. We've never put dollars and cents on the value of nature. On the other hand, deforestation alone costs our planet $4.5 trillion a year. Much, much more than the current economic and financial crisis about which all our newspapers are writing every day. $4.5 trillion a year. So TEEB has helped make the invisible visible by calculating the value of natural capital. But apart from the economic argument, There is simply comfort in knowing that we share this planet with an amazing diversity of species of life. Can you imagine living in a planet when there are only 7 billion of us going on 10? I heard the number 11 billion yesterday. Perhaps the way to make all this knowledge more meaningful is indeed to engage people outside of the conservation community, first by sharing the wonders of nature with them, and I'm very glad to hear from school children here that there are education efforts now underway to make sure that people living far from nature actually experience it. So sharing the wonders of nature with them, then letting them know that we might risk losing all that and all that nature gives us, and once we've lost it, there is no going back. You know, I always tell my colleagues in IUCN, when they say we are in the business of saving the planet, actually the planet would be fine without us. So we need to save ourselves and the way we understand knowledge. IUCN, my organization, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, has been working on conserving nature and natural resources for the past more than 60 years. And while our community has indeed grown larger and stronger, there are still a lot of people who just don't know that this is important and don't yet have access to the information that will make them stand up and take action. I think this is what this conference is meant to do. So here we need to take advantage of the rapidly expanding universe of technology in connecting us back to Earth. So with technology, our common eye on Earth is now able to see and use overlaying data on nature, covering the globe, both on land and sea. So IUCN aims to integrate the IUCN Red List of threatened species, which I spoke about earlier, and of course the World Database on Protected Areas, with the new Red List of ecosystems, which we're just beginning to work on now, and maps of key biodiversity areas around the globe. This will help us, I hope, and we expect, to make enlightened decisions on the use of this data for the conservation of nature. So I started with a quiz. Let me end with a poll. Can you please raise your hands if you've done a Google search this week? Who's done a Google search this week? That's pretty good. I expected that. Okay, now raise your hand if you've actually picked up a dictionary or an encyclopedia in the last month. Well, there are still some people who are using. That's good, but not as many as the Google search. Okay, the last question. How many of you have ever used the IUCN Red List of threatened species? More than I thought. Good, but not as many as the Google search. So I think it's clear from the results of this very tiny poll, and I'd like to run this poll outside on the streets, that we have to bring biodiversity knowledge in new and different ways. And increasingly, conservation organizations are doing just that, using everything from phone apps and cameras to social media and the Wikipedia to get people on board conservation in order to help them make better choices. So this brings me to my last and perhaps most important point. We do not need to know everything about all the 8.7 million species living on our planet before we take action. We need to listen to what the data tells us and what the data we already have is telling us, and that's what we need to already use to take action. We can, and in fact, we must prevent the extinction of threatened species. We can and we must reverse the loss of valuable ecosystems that sustain life on Earth. The only thing we cannot do is to say that we just didn't know. Thank you very much.